My name's Jonathan Merrill, and I've spent over half my life working in kitchens. I started as a young teenager dishwashing, and I've worked up and managed my own kitchens as a chef. But what I'm here to talk about is that our culinary renaissance is dying. In the 1960s, chefs and various figures began immigrating back in the United States and influencing our culture. These household names began to gain traction, eventually to the point where later in the late 1980s, a culinary renaissance began to take over, known as Food Network. I was raised up on this and eventually came across a book called Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain. Like many young cooks, I began to drink the Kool-Aid and say, I want to do this. As the internet age took off, we began to connect with chefs across the world and understand the type of food that was happening in different pockets that we may never experience but feel connected on the daily basis with them. But what this bred was a terrible culture of people thinking that they're all food critics by taking a picture of every meal that they ate. I'm guilty of doing this occasionally as well, but what I'm more guilty of is I found myself being young, talented, and running a kitchen of myself, angry as hell at the world. And I started to question, why is this? I've found success in my career, and yet for some reason, I don't feel like I'm truly connected to food the way I thought I was. And so I decided to sell everything I owned, except for a backpack and my chef knives, and spend the last 3.5 years knocking on the doors of world's leading kitchens, asking them if I could come in and cook. What I found was standing next to a donkey stable in rural Peru, looking at these stars, I had this epiphany of maybe as a culinary industry, we could do something more for the young cooks, because someday I'm gonna be too old to want to cook, and I'm gonna die off, and who's gonna give a shit? Cooks were harnessing all the wrong traditions. This macho, angry, vicious culture of you must break your soul down and be belittled to work harder for longer hours was driving me and my peers every night to go out, induce ourselves with alcohol, drugs, and what I saw was not only just depression and financial ruin as people burnt out, but suicide and death. It's something that's very close and passionate to me, so I'm politely here to say, fuck all that. We, as a culture, can do more, and chefs are starting to recognize this. Rene Redzepi runs one of the most important and influential kitchens of the past decade in Denmark, Copenhagen, Denmark, that one. It's called Noma, and he shut it down for the last year. Shut it down, moved his cooks abroad, and they're rebuilding it from the ground up, conducive to a creative environment. Chefs across the nation are starting to write articles and come out in interviews to recognize we can do more to help those that are coming up behind us to become even better than ourselves. That's a true recognition of our strengths as a chef. The industry is not going to change. It's always going to be hard. It's going to be tireless hours, and we're there because we love to cook. But the ways and means that we go about it can only go so far as chefs. So I'm here to implore all of you to recognize that cooking is what makes us human. It's the one distinct characteristic that defines us from all other species on the planet. No one else cooks. And so if you enjoy eating food, hopefully everyone in this room does, you'll understand the importance of recognizing that love is important when it comes to cooking. Following me and my journey is completely irrelevant to this conversation. You can. I have many other continents to still cross. 30 countries in 3 years sounds impressive, but I'm only scratching the surface. What I want to try and encourage all of you is in your own daily activity as consumers to recognize the work that as chefs we put in simply because we love to cook. There's a connection from the earth to our plates that is so overlooked sometimes, and we're so focused on the bottom line of how much we're spending. Yet ingredients have become trendy, and we see farmer markets pulling up in every neighborhood next to one another, that we do have an influence as chefs on modern day society. You see it in your Facebook feeds, so I hope that next time you're going out, you look to find out what chefs are really doing the most for the camaraderie of their kitchen to help build young cooks up. Because at someday, the kids in elementary school are going to be cooking your food for you, and I hope you understand the importance that Our culture is having a renaissance, and I'd hate to see it die. Thank you.